out. All right, is it time? I think that clock's a little slow, right?
By this clock.
That one's fast. Or right on time.
All right, we'll split the difference and start. Welcome to the Kaysville City Planning Commission for October 25th. First item of business is approval of minutes for September 27th and October 11th.
I'll make a motion that we approve the minutes from the October, September 27, 2018 and October 11, 2018 minutes.
Second.
Aye.
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 Aye. Very good. Conditional use permit for major home occupation A, a sales office at 435 South Wellington Drive for Megan Lowe is our next item.
Okay. I'll give a quick introduction, and not sure if Megan's here or not, but yes, she is, and she can explain further. Conditional use for this one is major home occupation A, which we don't see very frequently. We have a lot of home occupation B types. Essentially, the differences are home occupation Bs that we're dealing with almost exclusively with the Planning Commission are businesses that allow customers or visitors to come to the house in some form or fashion that don't necessarily count for employees. And this is kind of the opposite, where there wouldn't be customers or others coming to the home, but it does allow for the applicant to have an employee. Essentially, what the applicant's proposing to do is run an office where she sells product from her home and hoping to have a helper a few days a week that could come and help package and ship products. Again, where she's here, I could have her explain that in more detail if you desire, but based on my conversations with her and understanding of the business, we're recommending approval from staff without need for additional conditions. I'd be happy to take questions, and again, she's here if you'd like to speak with her.
Thank you. Do you want to come forward? State your name and...
I'm Megan Lowe, and my business is an online jewelry company. I make and sell leather earrings online through like Etsy and that kind of stuff. And I'm just wanting to have a neighbor girl come and help out, but my husband owns another business here in Kaysville, and so he just wants everything, we want to make sure everything's on the up and up and do everything the right way in case it ever, gets any bigger or whatever, but we want to make sure tax-wise we're paying her as an employee and not just giving her cash and that. So we had to do this, I guess.
Okay. Thank you. Do you have any questions for her?
I just do with the deliveries. So you fill them out, package them, and then are you generating a lot of, is it UPS or FedEx or something? A lot of trucks coming out, or how do you...
So pretty much like 99% of our product is sent through just the USPS, and I just come and deliver it up to the post office. And the only thing that's getting delivered to me are like once a month I get some jewelry boxes delivered to me, and just a couple of like shipments of leather, but it comes in a box that, I get more stuff sent from Amazon personally. So there's no like trucks stopping that are different than just our regular Amazon deliveries through UPS and FedEx, but nothing that has to like back into my driveway, nothing that doesn't just fit in the house. Our boxes are about this big, and we send them in padded envelopes. And I keep pretty much all of that stuff in all of those deliveries. If I have anything that's big at all, my husband has the battery store that's just here on Main, and I just have it delivered to his office. So nothing out of the ordinary is going to be delivered. Nobody comes to the house to buy anything. I don't have like a storefront. It's strictly online.
Great. Thank you.
And you're just thinking about one employee on a kind of a periodic...
Yeah, it's mostly just me and my husband, but because the holiday season is coming up, and with jewelry business, it's kind of a big season for us. Last year we had just kind of done a little bit here and there, but this year I think I'm going to need someone to come and help me, and I have a little neighbor girl that's 16 that wants to come and work a couple of hours after school to help me just get on top of some stuff so that we can maintain and not fall behind on our orders.
I see.
But I don't even know if she'll be around after the holidays. So it's mainly just, for the holiday season. But she may stay on for like 1 day a week or something after to just help me with stuff, keep on top of it.
Okay. Anything else? Okay, thank you, appreciate it.
Thank you.
Ready for a motion?
I'll go ahead and move that we approve a conditional use permit for major home occupation A sales office for Megan Lowe at 435 South Wellington Drive.
Second.
I didn't see it.
Aye.
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 Aye. Aye.
Voice is worse.
Aye.
Okay. Thank you. Good luck.
Yeah.
Okay. Next is a conditional use permit for major home occupation B tutoring for Julie Johnson at 54 North Flint Street.
And I'll just make mention, Mr. Chair, if you'll allow, the agenda order had an additional item on there for Ms. Kelly Richardson that she's withdrawn. So if anybody were here for that item for,
That's right.
as listed, the dance theater, they've asked to have that withdrawn while they have some conversations within their neighborhood.
Is anybody here for that item to have a question about it? Okay.
So to the item as introduced for Ms. Johnson, I visited with her regarding her proposed business, proposing to do a tutoring business from her home off of North Flint Street. You can see the property here, just south of 200 North on the east side of the street. And the business would very commonly actually just be a minor home occupation, a lot of one-on-one type tutoring, which is allowed in our businesses without the conditional use. But she does anticipate on occasion having 2 students at a time come to her where they do reading exercises and again, the small group tutoring lessons. Having visited with her, and I think it's very limited, but it meets what she wants to do and her model. Staff's recommended approval, but because it is technically a group and our ordinance puts restraints on that to limit the group size to no more than 2 students. So I believe she is here this evening. Thank you. So if you have questions of myself, be happy to take those, and if you'd like to visit with her, I'll pass it back to the chair.
Great. Thank you. Any questions? Do you want to come up, or should we just let it go without? You're here. Why don't you come make an impassioned speech for us, would you?
Okay. I'm Julie Layton Johnson, so I'm feeling a little bit like I'm being a bit of a coming to Kaysville and putting in a business, but this is something that I've done for, I've been a teacher for 27 years, and I am just not teaching in the regular schools anymore, and I'm just doing some of this at home. I noticed that there's quite a few students that maybe don't qualify for special ed. I was a resource teacher, and maybe they need a little bit of extra help without that, and so that's kind of where I'm stepping in to help with that. So.
Great. Thank you. Any other questions for her?
Are you okay with the limit of 2 students?
Yes, I think that the kids, I would only put 2 together if their skills were a little bit the same. But for right now, I'm just doing one-on-one tutoring, and it seems to be working really well.
Okay. Great. Thank you.
I have one question. How many sessions do you anticipate during the day?
Well, the thing that's kind of worked out well is that I've kind of been able to get into the homeschool situation. So in the mornings, I go to their homes.
Okay.
And so I have about 4 students in the morning, and then I have the day through by 10 o'clock in the morning, and then I just do Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. And I just have, right now I'm only doing it Tuesdays and Thursdays, but I have some open slots on Wednesdays, and I only have them from 4 o'clock to 6:30.
Okay, thanks.
So it's just kind of a very simple business.
Okay.
Great. Thank you.
All right.
Okay, I'll take a motion if we're ready.
I'll make a motion to approve a conditional use permit for major home occupation B tutoring for Julie Johnson at 54 North Flint Street.
Second.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Great. Congratulations. Good luck. Okay, so item 3A is no longer on the agenda, as was mentioned. So we'll move on to number 4, review of the conditional use permits for model home, low-profile sign and flags at 920 East Doris Place for Ivory Homes.
Okay, so for those who have been around a while in the Planning Commission, you may recognize this one, the property on the south end of town, just off of Main Street. It's part of the Montebello subdivision. Much of it has been developed. There are still a few remaining lots. As recently as 2016, back in October, Ivory received a 2-year extension on their model home, essentially, and the signs and flags that are there along with it, hoping that they would finish selling their lots within that time. Until they have just a few remaining, they may be gone any day, but they are asking for an additional 6-month extension on the use of the model home flags and development sign. They have a representative here this evening if you have additional questions on the subdivision and the use of it. Staff has not received any complaints or issues from the existing use. And with that, staff's recommending approval for an additional 6 months or until the lots are all sold in the subdivision, whichever is less. So with that, I'll pass it back to you, Mr. Chair.
Great. Thank you. What do you think? Questions? Concerns?
Lyle, they're good with the 6 months or until the last lot is sold, whichever sooner?
Yeah, and then maybe I can allow them to speak to that and confirm that. I spoke with Eric Freebairn with Ivory's. We were preparing this, and I think they have maybe 1 or 2 lots left in 3 lots in the whole area. So they expect that they'll be gone before then. Things change. They may have to come back, but they felt that that was appropriate. They've been there quite a while, and I think they're hoping to wrap up and be done.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, we'll take a motion. That sounds good. Josh, how about you? You ready? Tackle this controversy.
I make a motion that we approve a conditional use permit for model home, low profile sign and flags for Ivory Homes at 920 East Doris Place.
With the 6 month.
Yeah, with the 6 month or until 6 months extension or until all the lots are sold.
I'll second it.
Aye.
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 Great. Thank you. Okay, next is a public hearing and request to rezone 3.92 acres of property from general commercial to R120, which is single-family residential, and another 1.81 acres of property from general commercial to light industrial at approximately 2100 West, 200 North for Terra Venture Development.
This property is located, it's outlined here on the map, down 2nd North, just west of Angel Street. There's been some recent commercial development along there. We've looked at rezones requests here in the past. The request this time is to zone the western piece to R120, approximately just under 4 acres. And then the portion to the east and to the south that's somewhat surrounded to the light industrial zone. It's purported that the reason for the rezone request is to build an LDS chapel on the R120 zone and potentially storage sheds on the light industrial zone. Neither of those uses are allowed in the current general commercial zone. Might look a little better on the zoning map. You can see there's still general commercial along the frontage. The church does take some of the commercial frontage off 2nd North based on their proposal. And this is for your discretion to review. We would recommend that if you're comfortable with the proposal, that we possibly require a development agreement with this to make sure that you get what you expect. If we just were to rezone it, which is still your prerogative, if you're comfortable with anything that's allowed in those 2 zones under this configuration, you can just approve the zoning with no development agreement. But typically when they're rezoning kind of with a specific use and you're okay with the use, the development agreement's the way to guarantee that it does that and that we can mitigate any potential negative impacts. With that, the developer is here, and we were also required to have a public hearing.
Okay, great, thank you. Any preliminary questions before we open the public hearing? All right, we'll open the public hearing on this item. Is there anyone here that would like to present, discuss? Okay, we'll close.
Well, I'm here, but I've never done this before, so.
If you want to, if you'd like to say something, come up to the microphone and state your name, and then tell us what your
Sure.
thoughts
So
are.
my name is Casey Essex, and I'm here because I live over in Hill Farms, right by where this development is, and was interested in learning a little bit more about the light industrial rezoning. And I think I heard storage units or sheds, or maybe a little bit more about what that would entail, how many, anything like that. If that's possible.
Okay. Do you want to respond with what you know?
The developer.
Okay. Developer, why don't you come up? Yeah.
My name is Jeff Randall with Anderson Wallen and Associates here for Terra Venture Development. The light industrial zone, as Andy stated, is for storage units. That's the use, the intended use that we have for that property. The storage units would be kind of, I'll use the pointer here. There would be units along this side here that kind of enclose it. There'd be a gate to get into it, obviously, but then there would be units around the outside. So there's kind of, you're going to have a wall, the roof on top of the building that kind of screen the other units that are in the middle of that. The access would be coming off 200 North back into here with the plan for future buildings along 200 North in the front in the GC zone is what's planned at this time.
So will that be not visible from the street or somewhat visible? What will the street look like?
Yeah, I think if you could go into more description of what you're going to do here with the architectural style, even the office buildings that you're proposing in the front, how this all fits together as a development.
Okay, so this slide is kind of our development plan of what we're working on for the project overall. So on this side, you can see is the stake center that Andy mentioned that takes up the 3.92 acres on this side. This building is the We Care pediatricians on the one side. I think we've got a dentist on the other side. This building is not built yet, but this lot has been sold. And so there's a plan for another office building there. And then these two buildings are proposed to come in and could kind of continue that same development across the frontage here that you see with what was phase one of the project.
So are you, just real quick, with those office buildings, are you requiring the same architectural style so it all kind of fits together even though you're selling individually? Do you?
Yeah, we do have some architectural controls as we sell those properties and we work with those with, for example, this one. These two has not been decided if we're going to build them ourselves or if we're going to sell them. But yes, we do have some controls on that. We do want to be able to say this is our development. I know Dave Adams is here. Dave and Stewart have talked about potentially even moving their office down here and officing out of one of these. So this is something that they do care what it looks like and maintaining that feel of what's there. And then in the back would be the storage units, as you can see. We grabbed an example of kind of what we're thinking as far as, having some pitched roofs like this, for example, along this side with some landscaping to kind of buffer it. Really the only area you'd have is a gate right here, similar to this wrought iron gate coming in here. So this area would kind of be self-contained where we can buffer it and kind of screen it and still maintain a nice development out along 200 North.
So then with the storage units, I think when people hear storage units, they have a negative impression of it. The architectural style of these, is it a shingled roof, asphalt shingled roof, and is it brick? Is
so
there a
it'd
bigger
be-
picture of that?
It'll be masonry, such as this right here. It'll be masonry. The roof would match the same style pitched roof that we've got here, going on here. So yes, the architectural nature will flow throughout the project.
But this is not a rendering of how it's going to look, right?
No,
Because
this is an example.
That's from a street, and you're...
This is a street, yes, a photo from a street that we have of a similar. The reason we took this is we want a pitched roof to kind of
Right.
tie in with this. The units inside that you won't be able to see will probably have flat roofs, but on the perimeter where you would see it, we'd have pitched roofs and so forth, so it tied in with the development.
You mentioned a wall. Where would the wall go?
Well, this wall here this wall you see here would be what you would see along here, and then we would have a wall to close this in here, a gate to close this, and then then just the walls kind of around the perimeter of these buildings.
And it's a brick wall, so it's a decorative
Correct.
style wall, correct?
Correct. Yep, it'd be a masonry brick. Yes.
And these would have 24-hour access, right?
We haven't got into that detail. To be determined,
Okay.
depending on how they get managed.
Okay. I have a question for Lyle and Andy. So I drove over there today. Behind it, it's houses, right? Well, actually, there's a field. Aren't there two fields?
Yes.
Okay.
So
And
these-
and
these
to be
two-
houses to be,
The houses are out on Angel Street, and they own the large lots with
Okay.
horse pasture in the back.
okay.
Kinda
And then
see
to
it
the
on
other
here.
side, it's houses I saw right now, so.
To the west of the church site is one of the phases of Hill Farms,
Right, okay.
newer homes, residential. Yes.
So really, from the street, from Second North, there's no visibility necessarily to the storage units. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, the only thing
office
you would,
buildings-
if you could look between the two buildings real quick, you could see them. There will be landscaping, trees, shrubs, et cetera, along here. So, your views back in there are very limited.
Okay.
Well, no, this was
Let me
proposed
just-
last
Can I
time.
interrupt for a second?
Sure.
We're still in the public hearing. Let's
Oh,
see
yes.
if there's anyone
Oh,
else
okay.
Oh, I
that...
thought you.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Well,
sorry.
we hadn't quite closed it. So is there anyone else that would like to speak? Do you want to say something else?
I have a follow-up question. if that's
Sure.
okay? Want me to come up here? So you talked about what was visible from 200 North. Can you talk a little bit, if you are in Phase 4 of Hill Farms, what the visibility is?
Yes, I have a slide.
Oh, perfect, thank you.
Let me just ask, sorry, is there anyone else that wants to speak on this? Okay.
So to answer her question, Hill Farms over here, visibility of that would be across the parking lot. And I believe this is about 320 feet, 325, something like that, across the church property, the property that the church is purchasing. So that's, to put it in perspective, 300 feet is about a football field. So you'd be looking across the parking lot to then see trees. Now, the church would most likely have some landscaping, some trees on their perimeter of their parking lot, and then you would have the storage units on the other side of all that.
Which would actually be a fence.
Yeah,
Or
there'd
the-
be a
the
fence.
wall.
And, yeah, be a wall there, yes, a wall along that side. It'd just be a masonry wall, yeah.
And so if you did see any visibility, it'd be pitched roofs that would be,
It'd be similar to looking at that. You'd have masonry wall and pitched roof.
That's probably likely after two of the stake center fences, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it'd be a ways out there. And then also on this slide, we've received a couple of, one gentleman that I've spoken with lives over in the Perry Homes neighborhood. So this is about 288 feet is our measurement from this lot to the nearest corner of the units. And so again, there's about close to a football field, across the field over to where the units were, where you would see the wall, the masonry wall again. So there's a pretty significant buffer there from those homes.
How many units will you put in?
We haven't gone through and broke that all down yet of to what fits in there, so I'm not sure on that.
Okay.
All right, I'm going to ask one more time. Anyone else? And I'll close this public hearing if there's no one else. Oh, okay. Good. Please come forward.
My name's excuse me, Zach Michelson. I live directly across the street there in Hill Farms as well. I guess my biggest concern would be like spotlighting, like this week here, how bright it is at night, things like that. I mean, barbed wire access, I think, is a big issue. As far as nothing's going on good at midnight at the storage unit, kind of things like that. I know most storage units have cutoffs, but those are concerns of mine. I just don't want a revolving door all night long, because I mean, I'm directly in view of that area from my front porch. So, I mean, I just kind of want to fine tune it. I mean, I know there was a storage unit for the whole thing in development at one point, correct? Correct. So, I mean, that's my biggest concern, is just the ice bucket. Same thing with anybody else, but I do like the idea that you're going with more of just a brick wall and thing. I like that idea. But just kind of concerned about lighting, barbed wire, spotlighting kind of thing. Really big issue, I think.
Okay.
With all that industrial, I can only imagine with the weed care and then moving on down, there's going to be more and more and more light. I mean, it's pretty bright. I don't know if you've ever been out there. There's lighting every 6 feet on that building, and they light up that block. It's crazy. So they do turn them off sometimes, but they are on most of the time.
Great, thank you. Did he state his name?
Yeah,
okay,
Zach
great. Okay.
Michelson.
So, question on that.
All right, so we're going to close the public hearing.
Okay.
Is that all right? Okay, so the public hearing is now closed.
Just a quick question on that. Andy or Lyle, if the rezoning on this were approved, would this need to come back for like a site plan review or anything like that?
No, these are both permitted uses. Well, actually, the church would have to. It's a conditional use in the residential zone. The storage units would not. They're permitted in the light industrial zone.
Okay.
So if we have restrictions, we want to do it now through a development.
As part of the zoning or part of the development
Yes.
agreement for the zoning.
You know, I agree with Mr. Michelson, because I actually live like maybe right over here. And yeah, that house right, or the office building there, it is excessive in the lighting. It really is pretty bright. So that's something that I would recommend with these others, is that it's be toned down, because and they're big, tall light fixtures. So maybe tone that down a little bit. It doesn't need that much lighting, but the architectural style I really like. And when this was originally proposed, I was pretty adamantly opposed to it. And since this has come out, I've looked at it. I've gone over as well and just kind of sat off of 200 and looked at it, and even from in our neighborhood. And I have to admit, I've warmed up to this type of a concept, as long as it is architecturally and tastefully done. I think having the church buffer this area in here, and then if you have nice, architectural design like you've got right here, out there on the front, that adds a nice feel coming into that. And then back here, I was a little bit concerned about the architectural style of that. It would need to conform and fit with, I think, more of the commercial feel of the office buildings. So I like what you're proposing on that, and that would, in my opinion, if we were to move forward, that would definitely be one of the conditions of a development agreement with that. And then you do have that field right here that pretty much buffers the houses over here, because Jake Lane runs over in here. So there is quite a bit of distance buffering it. And I kind of look long-term at it, too. With the highway going on back over here, I look, if it doesn't get developed, and if the stake center doesn't go in here, I look what could happen, 5, 6, 7, 8 years down the road. As this highway comes in and we get an interchange there, what could go in there if it stays where it's at? We could end up with, retail, a C-store, gas station or something. I've talked to a few of my neighbors about it, and, they expressed some of the concerns regarding the general plan about creating let's see, right here. Where did it go? Yeah, growth should mostly occur through development within the city. Development should improve public safety and sense of community. An adequate revenue base should be developed to fund city operations with the infrastructure. And it talks about, refurbishing or encouraging business and stuff. And as we talked through it with some of my neighbors, some of the things we came up with was, with the traffic, eventually this is going to become a much busier road. Storage units, I know I've got one here in town that I go to. I go to it probably every 2 or 3 months is about all. Businesses, usually business hours, and this is probably going to be somewhat minimal, and most folks are going to be coming in on a truck with a trailer or something like that. So as we talked through it, kind of the consensus the feeling came was that it's not going to have as great as an impact on the traffic and the safety that comes along with increased traffic as it would if it were, if this was all a commercial or a retail development or some other type of use. And we're dealing with a general commercial zoning that we've got to deal with part of it anyway, and so I understand land cost on commercial is a lot higher than residential, and that's one of the reasons why residential hasn't occurred there, is because the land value is just too high. Destination Homes and some of the others, they're not going to pay the land value for that because it doesn't pencil out to do residential, only unless you go multifamily and go up vertically. And I don't think the neighbors want anything going up vertically in there that's a multifamily. So with some of the neighbors I talked with, as we talked through this, and I think it's evident because they aren't here. We've got some from Hill Farms, and I think that these buffer it. And if we can tone those lights down and come up with something that's a little bit more subtle, and as long as we stay with a nice architectural design, I think this buffers it back into here. And then with the church and any landscaping they do around, I think it creates a much more pleasant proposal and feel than what we had before. The one before was just totally unacceptable, I think, for the neighborhood. It didn't fit the general plan. It didn't fit the neighborhood. I think this one's a good compromise with what you guys have done. I say this, I'm probably going to get a couple neighbors that are going to say, why did you say that you were comfortable with it? But I'm comfortable with it as long as there's some controls on a development agreement to make sure that this development is done right. And then if it's done right, I think it fits some of the general plan conditions, and I think it can help solve a problem that we potentially could have in the future.
I just have a quick question. So you talked about a problem potentially in the future. Are you meaning in case it stayed general commercial and it had businesses there?
Yeah, if
a gas station.
Yeah, I'm thinking if this, especially with the highway coming in and the west corridor there, and with 200 having the on-off ramp, we've talked before about West Side services, and I think we've got some pretty good services now with the Smiths development. I think that has actually enhanced the West Side considerably, and it was beautifully done. And if this doesn't happen, and if, say, a stake center doesn't go there, or that parcel, if it remains undeveloped and smartly developed, I could see this eventually coming down the road to where we get maybe a gas station, maybe a little strip center or something in there that could create a lot more traffic, and in my opinion would be a little bit more intrusive to the neighborhood.
Sure.
That's what I see long term if something doesn't happen. I think having a stake center there acts as a great buffer to this property, and then putting those office buildings up front also acts as a buffer there. And I was even looking at the land behind it. About the only thing that could happen with that land right now, if all those lots, there's like 3 lots going over, if they were assembled, you could create another development in there. Otherwise, if that were ever sold and developed, you could do a flag lot with maybe two homes on the back side of it. I can't really see a whole lot more happening back there, so I think that there's going to be a buffer as well back there with that vacant, or with the filled.
Right. But we're all talking within a commercial, are you talking about within the commercial zone?
Oh, no, the filled and back's not. I'm just saying because you got that filled back here, and I don't think it's wide
still
enough to really.
though.
No, that.
Still commercial.
Yeah, that's commercial.
Yeah, that is.
That is
right.
commercial.
Yeah, that's commercial.
It'll be real difficult to develop commercial way back there.
Yeah, because it's
Narrows
almost landlocked. It's too narrow to really do much on it.
But there is a road stubbed in from Hill Farms that
Grassy
could
Plain
accommodate
Drive.
some sort of residential development.
If you go to it, because
Yeah, that
it looked
There's a
almost
road- there's
too
a-
thin
there's a
or
road
too
stubbed
narrow.
in.
Well, okay, so what's that? My thing doesn't work, but that dimension line right next
This
from
one?
there, what's that at the end? 238 or something you said?
288.
288. Okay. So, this, yeah, I agree. This strip right here, if this development comes in as it is, this strip eventually is commercial. That's not going to be commercial anymore. Someone's going to come in and want to rezone that because no one's going to be able to sell this. Basically, from there to there is the commercial strip and of land, and so no one's going to ever buy it. So in effect, if we rezone this, then eventually we're rezoning this part too because it becomes unusable as commercial.
There'll be some up here to some point on the front that will have frontage on Angel that could be commercial.
Yeah,
but
small part.
the back, at least half of this is very difficult as commercial.
Because the back half's pretty much landlocked.
Yeah, with the exception of the road stubbed in out
Yeah,
of the
you could
subdivision.
stub it up through there, but how, if it ever were to get rezoned, by the time you put road improvements in there, could you still do underneath our current R120 or even R114? Could you do
How much land is it?
residential on both sides? I don't think it's
I
wide
know
enough, is it?
when that phase of Hill Farms was going in, I reviewed that pretty carefully. That's why that stub road's there. As I recall, there's 100 feet or so between the road and the property line
On both sides.
on both sides. And
Okay.
then come up and cut back across to the south into the Perry development on that undeveloped property there. So you could bring
You're
this
thinking
road
it's-
through here and come down. And you could serve most of the property. It may not be
Okay.
the ideal thing, but they have ability to do some kind of, again, most likely residential development back there.
Have these properties been approached to expand this at all, like these two owners and then this one?
Yeah, the Adams have approached them back years ago, I'll say, Dave. Years ago, and they didn't want to sell at that time. I don't think they've been approached recently, but
When they were approached, was this already general commercial?
yes.
I believe this property has not always been general commercial.
Right.
And they consented to that zoning when there was potential development on this property. That development obviously went away. But they're just a couple people that own some horses and they're very satisfied with their current condition.
Uh-huh. So one of my concerns is that if we approve this rezone, this gets rezoned as has been proposed. Like I've said, we lose that commercial in effect. Maybe a square up here, but we lose that commercial. And as I said the last time this came here, this is the only piece of commercial we have out in this portion of Kaysville. And I think it was done on purpose that way because when the West Davis corridor comes in, as I said the last time this came around, this could be a very nice neighborhood commercial center. It's not going to be like Smith's or even further east, but it could be a place where the folks that live out here don't have to drive up here and congest what's going on up here.
Seems like that's why it was done.
Exactly
Josh, right?
why it was done.
Yeah.
And so what we're doing, if we rezoned this, is we're saying that wasn't a good decision, or whoever thought about that, we don't really care, and we're changing the deal because these are going to go away. We take out a chunk, which becomes not commercial with the church, and then all you have is this little triangle that's not very usable. And so we just swipe away the planning that had taken place. And we kind of do it prematurely, in my opinion, because we don't really know how West Davis Corridor is going to affect this place. This could, if we didn't do it, let's say, if we didn't approve this and rezone this right now, and then these property owners possibly come and sell, well, now you have a much bigger piece of general commercial that can be developed in a commercial manner and not piecemealed, and the planning that had gone into it is gone away. So that's some of my concerns.
Do you have a larger map that shows the zoning on the west side? That could expand on that just a little bit?
I can pull one up.
Because I think Josh makes a great point. It's tough to lose the one island we have.
And while we're bringing that up, let me just contrast it with the one that we just talked about over by Boondocks. Okay,
right.
Because I think part of our analysis there was one thing we said was we like to hold on to commercial, but that one now. Reasonable minds can differ in this, especially in hindsight, but in that one, we said, well, this property has been very difficult to sell. It hasn't been marketable. Again, that's where reasonable minds can differ after the fact, but at the time, we were saying hasn't been selling, and so this is a compromise between getting it used, and it was a tough commercial spot. This one is different than that. This one is actually, I think, a marketable one when you get the whole square involved.
That's the thing.
Well,
you get the whole square, and so you're banking on that you're going to get those.
Isn't this the one where the
homeowners to
city
sell.
council? Am I getting that mixed up? Isn't this the one where the
Boondocks,
city
yeah,
council said no?
Yeah,
This one?
The Boondocks.
No, the Boondocks.
Next to the
Boondocks,
Boondocks.
right.
Yeah, and the rationale was that the city, they didn't want to lose commercial
Right.
zoning because we need
So,
commercial.
so
if
this
that
one's
was-
even
if that
be-
one didn't pass muster, this one wouldn't even come close.
Okay,
That's
right.
your point, right?
That's one of my points, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Still going.
Yeah, sorry.
You're just getting warmed up.
Okay, let's put a pin in that one for a second. One of the questions I asked last time, and I'll ask it again this time, was are any of the either the church or the storage sheds? Do you have anybody under contract?
Church is under contract.
Okay.
We are in our due diligence phase with them currently. So one, just comment to your question before that, or comment before that. I agree this is a neighborhood commercial area. That's, I agree with you that I think that was what the intent here was. I can back up a step because I know what happened when this got zoned. What happened is this is where Smith's was looking. And a large parcel, this being the Adams property's 9 acres total, to count the 2 parcels behind it, we're probably talking 12, 13 acres of commercial. That's what it takes to build a Smith's. Smith's decided to go up at Angel and Flint. They moved up, or not Angel and Flint, 200 North and Flint, and Smith's moved up there. This got left. Now, if you look at what neighborhood commercial is, neighborhood commercial's 4 or 5 acres, 3, 4 buildings, businesses that work with the small neighborhoods that it's within. To develop 13 acres, now you're looking at the Smith's development up the street that's 13 acres. This is a little bit big for what I would classify neighborhood commercial.
Did you guys do the Smiths up the street?
Yes. And I worked
So-
on this site for Smith's as well.
And so, just orient me from, let's say, from there to that corner over. That what's that approximately? If we just encompass all of it.
So this whole area,
Yes.
that's about 12 acres, 12, 13 acres there.
Yeah.
We've got about a 1.5, I think, across the street.
Yeah.
And retailers too, they because I've worked with some of them, they look at rooftops, they look at the demographics, they, traffic counts.
Yep.
There's a lot of things to
Yep.
look at. They
All
look
of
at their proximity to other.
Well, and I
their
don't
neighboring
necessarily think a
funds.
retail. Retail is, there might be some retail here, but I see it more like what was already there, and what's been proposed. This small portion, I guess. I'm not 100% convinced that this is markedly different than what came before, other than the church. And I don't know that, in my opinion, it's the best idea to swap a church for some potentially good neighborhood commercial. There's a lot of places to build churches, and there's a lot of churches. But there's not a lot of general commercial out here.
I think that the dynamics in the market had changed a lot, too, out here. I mean, you know, these
And everywhere.
general plans they're a living document, I think. They evolve over time. They give us direction. They give us somewhere to go to. That's why they look at them every, you know, I don't know, 6 or 7 years. But we have to have a good plan, and I think we do have a good plan. But markets changed. This whole west side here has changed dramatically with Hill Farm subdivision, with the Perry division, and you know, you keep going down, and Ivory's building a new little subdivision down there as well. You've got coming off the other side back there where Symphony Homes is going. A lot has changed.
See, and I don't. I mean, I confess that I don't know the rationale. I'm only assuming the rationale for this when this was all zoned as general commercial. But if we assume it was, let's just say 6 years ago or more than, when was it rezoned? Do you know, Andy, off the top of your head? 10?
Probably at least 10.
Okay.
Maybe longer.
So let's say 10. Hill Farms wasn't there. None of this was there. But there was probably a 20-year plan for the West Davis corridor. There probably was an idea that this was going to be a light, you know. So I would actually beg to differ. I think the plan is exactly what they thought was going to happen, that this was going to become a major intersection and we need some general commercial around it. And I don't think, again, I admit I could be wrong. I don't think they said, well, we're going to rezone this general commercial so Smith's can pick here or here, and if Smith's picks here, then this can go to whatever it wants to be. My guess is they said, we want some commercial out here and Smith's here. I mean, you might have more hindsight in that, but that's my guess. And so I actually think we are either where they had planned it to be or getting there, and we're still in a state of flux, and the only aspect that's still in flux is what's it going to be like when West Davis Corridor comes in. And I think when West Davis Corridor comes in, this becomes even more importantly general commercial. And if we do what's going on here now, I fear personally that we just totally shortchanged the vision for what was going to go here.
I think one of the issues with that being zoned general commercial, and I think what you say sounds reasonable, and I would have guessed the same thing, that that's there for some kind of a commercial retail facility. Mm-hmm. But the general commercial zone allows offices, and they're already building offices. They've already built the dental office, and it looks like they're planning on building more offices. Mm-hmm. That's not commercial, in terms of being like a retail center.
Yeah.
And they can do that. They can do it as it's currently zoned, and it sounds like that's what they plan to do. So that's going to change the whole nature of it as well. Now, I think the stake center is a whole different question, and takes away a lot of that property, and of course kind of landlocks that piece a little bit further to the south as well. So that's kind of a little bit of a different issue.
Yeah, and if we say if that back side did not get rezoned to light industrial, but we still rezone for the R120, they'd probably just put offices back there because they got the land, they can control it, and they are doing the offices. That's what they're planning. So I think we're already down that road. So I would assume that they'd probably, instead of, if it got denied, they'd probably come back and probably put offices back in there that match the offices on the front side.
If the intent was for that to be some kind of a neighborhood retail center, I would have argued for crafting a zone that would be just that, and putting it here. But that hasn't happened. They use the zone that they had, which is the general commercial.
Exactly.
But it also allows for offices, which they're doing.
I like what Josh said, although I don't know that I give the 10 years ago Planning Commission that much foresight to be able to predict that it's going to have as much potential as it does, that we see it does now. In other words, I think that
I beg to differ on that.
200 North, I think that the interchange there makes this more has more potential for commercial, and maybe it goes beyond offices.
How long has that light been planned there, Andy?
That light at Second North and
Yeah.
Angel Street, that's been in our capital facility plan for 8 or 9 years. At the time it was initially put in the capital facility plan, it was in the 3rd category of timing, which meant, when you go 1 to 5, 5 to 10, and beyond 10, it was in the beyond 10 category 7 or 8 years ago.
Yeah.
I guess my point is better stated this way. I think it's got the potential that was probably hard for them to imagine, that we're going to have this 200 North and it's going to be what it is. I think we're in a better spot to see the potential than they were.
Yeah, and
we don't have to. We make the decision now based on what we think, based on what we think's right.
And I think in what you say, it does make sense, but we're past that. They've already got the office. They've already sold the other one. The other one's going. They own and control the land.
What's the other one you're talking about?
Right next to it.
This one's sold right here for another
And
office.
then they've got the 2 other planned for there. So I think that the way this is going right now, if this is denied or not approved or whatever, I think that's going to become, they're going to fill that in with potentially some office buildings, especially if they're having success with them.
The problem we're going to have, that anybody trying to develop this commercial, is the depth of these properties is too deep. The buildings, the people that are wanting to be in these offices, they want to be out here on the street. They'll want to be over here on Angel, but nobody wants to be back in here because they can't be seen. It's hard to get to them. It's hard to run a business back there. And so what ends up back here is office, the little warehouse on the back, a storage yard, and the plumber moves in and runs his plumbing business out of it. Or some other contractor moves in and runs his business out of it. It doesn't, the depth of this property is very hard to sell or develop unless you've got a big tenant or a big box, Smith's.
I don't think that, I know you do site plans every day, all day, and I'm sure if someone came to you and said, hey, okay, Jeff, we want to get some creative site planning in here, and these are the users we have, you could make it very attractive if you cut all of this out as commercial. And even, let's just say hypothetically, now I know this is maybe a pipe dream, maybe not, that's gone, all these are purchased. I would really like something else at this intersection besides that, but that, again, it may not be possible. But I'm just saying, hypothetically, you look at the potential of what this is already zoned at, instead of what's in front of us, let's look at the plan. Let's look long-term at possibilities, and Jeff's site planning skills with some users that want to come in here and a developer that wants to do it, TerraVenture and others, maybe TerraVenture exclusively, and it could look really nice. And then Jeff would be back here saying, hey, this is going to be an awesome project. I mean,
sure.
So my question is, if the rezone wasn't approved, then basically the church couldn't build there, right? And the storage units would be a no-go for the light industrial. So, okay. And then it would most likely be office buildings? Would that be the plan? I mean, I know it's hard to
It'll become commercial, what I'll call commercial lots.
Yeah.
That could be anything that fits within that general commercial zone. I mean,
Right.
yeah, our intent is to keep office buildings along the front, but I can pretty sure guarantee that those office buildings won't be in the back, because nobody will want to pay the money to build that nice of a building on the back. It'll be something different. So
I'm not saying that I like this example, but I'll give you an example of what I think could come in here. Again, this is not a comment on what I think is good, but if you envision the intersection, I don't know the addresses, Antelope and the road that Walmart is on out in Syracuse, the south, what's that?
2000 West.
So the southwest corner of that main intersection, there's like a bowling alley and some retail, and there might be fast food and some there might be some offices in there or something, I don't know, a gym, what have you. There are some amenities there that people use because they live out there and they don't want to drive on Antelope, which is a nightmare, further east. Well, in 10 or 15 years, when this is all built out here, people might think to themselves, wow, that would be nice if something was out here. Now I have to drive farther or whatever. I'm just trying to say that if we do what's being proposed now, we shortchange the possibility of having something like that out here.
You know, Josh, I don't disagree with you, but I think they've already started building the office buildings, and it sounds like that's going to continue. And so, in 10 or 15 years, I think that's going to be offices.
Well, but
and whether they can redevelop it at
there's
that
a lot
point, I
of
guess
ifs.
they could. But
well, yeah, but that's what you do in planning. That's what you do in
sure.
zoning.
If they all sell, if they go.
That's what you do in zoning and planning.
Yeah.
Well,
you think about ifs.
But if we're envisioning to do what you're talking about, which I think is not a bad idea, then we ought to craft a zone that would do that.
Well, which is fine, and we keep it as general commercial, and guess what? We're redoing our general plan in a year or less.
Yeah.
But then, if we craft a zone on this or do something of that nature, what are current landowners? What are their personal property rights on that?
Well,
their personal property rights are they're in the zone that they had when they either bought the property or acquiesced or maybe didn't when it got rezoned.
And so then we come and change the zone.
But that happens all the time.
Well, but we're not.
Yeah,
But
we don't
we don't have a
make the zoning
rezone
decision
application in front of us that's that, right?
Well, but we don't also make rezoning decisions based on our feelings about one property owner. I mean, that's just not what you do, in my opinion.
So, Wilf, are you saying that a city can go in on a property and rezone it arbitrarily?
Oh, it happens all the time.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what we would be doing here.
I just wanted to get clarification there. Well, right, but the landowner is asking for the rezone.
Well, but there's all these other people who maybe don't want it. Granted, they're not here, which is surprising to me, by the way. The last time it was here, it was like knives and pitchforks or whatever, torches and pitchforks. So
there were some emails.
Yeah, emails. Oh, that's true. Okay. Yeah, well, I heard the word church, and that's probably why people aren't here, which shouldn't come into our mind, in my mind. We should say, what is the best future use for this, and I think it's general commercial, in my opinion.
Just to answer that, yes, we actually had a neighborhood meeting 2 nights ago.
Okay.
A few neighbors showed up. We showed them our development plan. We've also emailed them our development plan, and that got shared on Facebook and with the neighbors. And so, yeah, we have communicated quite a bit with the neighbors, which is why we have a different result tonight than we did last time we were here.
Yeah.
So that's just to answer that question.
Yeah.
There. So.
Which is good. Which is good that you do that.
Well, and I do think it's worthwhile to remember that we're recommending or not to the city council.
Right.
The city council is going to make that decision, and I think, they've given us at least some indication as to how they value the few bits of general commercial that remains. Did you ever show us that map of the broadened out where general commercial is?
Tell me what you want to see.
Well, just go back to the zoning one, but just broaden out, so like till we get to Smith's or something.
How far out do you want to go?
I don't know, just a couple times. Get Smith's. Can you connect? A little more than that.
I mean, if we saw all of Kaysville west of I-15, it would sort of be a stark contrast of how this is pretty core commercial out in this area, at least.
The purple is the light industrial. It's the business park. This is the Smith's development.
Okay.
There is some zoning down here, including general commercial.
Is that the Kaysville boundary where there's no...
Where there's no color. However, UDOT now owns all this property. Yeah. At one time we thought the highway would be a little farther west, and so this was designed to pick up the immediate off-ramp.
So that's
traffic.
the right-of-way.
But then they moved it east, and so that consumes that whole portion.
Okay, so that commercial is gone.
That's gone.
that gas station's gone.
Yeah.
Unless it's over the top of the.
Can I, before I forget, I want to say, personally, if I were on the city council, the tax revenue, future tax revenue question or issue that comes up a lot with commercial stuff is not a convincing argument for this to stay general commercial. It's a nice side note, I suppose, but it's not the reason why I would say we need to keep this general commercial. I'm not saying we need to have general commercial so we can put more money in the city government. I'm saying I think it's a good idea from a planning perspective to keep it what it is. And I think if we just, and I confess, I think I'm probably guilty of this, but I think sometimes we as a planning commission and or a city council, we just tend to approve what comes before us. Oh, looks good, sounds good, but that's, without the planning.
Yeah.
And we need to look at the planning. And I think if we rezoned this, we would be doing a disservice to the planning that has gone into this spot.
Well, then I'll add to that the future planning. I know that it's on the table to really, kind of redefine the general plan for Kaysville and to look at the zoning and to look at the land that we do have the ability to make decisions about and to see what's best for the city, like you said, not necessarily, different other parties. What's best for the city.
I could make one comment on that. This neighborhood commercial is just that. It's for the neighborhood. Mm-hmm. It seems to me by the neighbors' response here that they're happy with what we're proposing to them. I don't know that I would get the same response if I proposed a bowling alley on here to them.
Remember how I very carefully qualified what I said.
But my point is that you guys are talking about what's best for the city, not in a dollar standpoint from taxes, but from what's best for this neighborhood. And I think we're seeing what the neighbors are in agreement with by them not being here tonight,
but
and the support that we've seen through.
If I could just play devil's advocate to that, I personally lament the lack of citizen input in local planning, and so the fact that citizens don't show up, in my opinion, rarely says anything about what they really feel. It's just local planning issues are not on the forefront of their minds or even close to it unless it's in their backyard. And the only ones, how many people were at the meeting that you had?
2.
Okay, 2. And how did you notify that meeting?
Through the neighborhood, Patricia.
Yeah, actually,
Patricia reached out and.
Well, I was late, but I can comment on that.
Yeah, Patricia Rawlings she was the one that
reached out to us and
when we did this the first time, she organized a petition against it, and we've talked a little bit, and we've talked with several of the neighbors. I think that's part of the reason is because there's been discussion going on with the neighbors since the last application and neighborhood input, and I think that's part of the reason is because they've been comfortable. But I don't know, Chair, if you want to get Patricia's input from.
Please. It's all right. Wait.
It goes to the comment that Josh was, Patricia Rawlings, right? The comment that Josh made about, last time there was a lot of people, right?
Yeah.
This time, there's still some people that, don't want the LI. You mentioned that you had a few emails. But I think the majority of the people really would love it if it was residential, all of it. Not saying it follows the general plan or anything, but that's what the neighborhood wants. And so when they heard that the majority of the previous plot was going to be rezoned to R1 for a possible stake center under contract, not final yet, and that a smaller portion, they were very hesitant to say anything or do anything because they really would love to have residential, the whole area.
I think our experience is they want it to be exactly what it is right now, and residential is the least offensive change. And so they don't want anything. They want farmland.
But
They
it's
want-
not residential.
Yeah, so
I know, but
commercial.
then,
Yes.
well, if you're going to
It's a
change
church.
it,
Yeah, make
we'll
it
take residential. And then if we can't have residential, we'll take a church. Very last on that list is what it is right now.
Well,
They just want it to be
I
an
would
empty
say
field.
LI is very last on that list. But yes, I think that's why they're not. I mean, I put out the vibes, posted things on different Facebook pages, and there were a handful, that are like, absolutely not, we don't want that. But the responses that I got back were, they really are okay with the state center if it goes through. I guess there's always that if, but they're just sort of hesitant, I guess. Not as vocal as before because it was a huge area for just LI, and there wasn't a lot of information as there is more now. So.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And to Josh's point about citizen involvement in planning, what would be, equally as interesting would be to get people from not that area, right? Because
Which is
Well,
what we are
how-
Sans
There.
Gary.
That's how it was done the first time. And I don't, you may have been on the planning commission at
I
the
wasn't.
time. But
How's that?
10, 11 years, 12 years ago, whenever it was when this was done, I'll bet you didn't have much opposition to it. You probably didn't have, because we didn't have neighbors in here.
Well, nobody-
cared about
but-
it. Nobody cared about it except
if-
the planning
if-
commission at the time.
If there's one thing that nobody, or this might be cynical, very, very few people show up for, it's a general plan modification, right? People don't show up for the long-term things except for us sitting at this table and the staff and maybe city council. Anyway, so.
Okay. So again, with the eye on, this is a recommendation to the city council. We've had a good discussion, and I think we have someone here from the city council who could relay the
All the conversation.
sentiments. He's been taking notes, I'm sure. We're relying on our steady hand of Emery.
One thing I would like to say for the development side is, Mr. Bullock brought up a development agreement. I think Andy brought it up as well. And Patricia, we've had this conversation with Patricia and a few others, is that the reason why we're asking for an LI zone is to be able to put the storage units in, not to build an industrial building on there. So we would be fine to do a development agreement that restricts it to GC uses plus, storage units on that property, or storage units and just GC uses, if that's how you'd want to take care of that. But we have told the neighbors that we would be fine with a condition of that nature, so that we don't open the door to the what ifs that could happen in the future.
That's a good alternative. Thank you.
Yeah, and quite frankly, that's the only way I would be comfortable doing it, is that there were conditions placed on it. But like we said before, I think we're already heading down a road to where I think we're kind of behind the eight ball now to develop that whole thing as a big old 12-acre neighborhood, commercial shopping zone or center or something of that nature.
I got to say I agree with what Josh said about this. Whether it was intended or not, it really is a good location for a neighborhood commercial center of some kind. And really, I would think the west side of Kaysville would have been better off if there had been more of those scattered around as well. So from that standpoint, you look at this one, it's there, we've got it. You never know really how it's going to develop, but you plan for that, and that's what you zone for. So that was the intent, I think, or it certainly would work that way well. The zone that's there, though, doesn't just limit it to that kind of use. It allows for offices, and they've begun the development of offices, which is not really to some extent, it could be considered neighborhood commercial, but usually it's not. And so that's begun. So in a way, it's kind of already moving away from being that neighborhood commercial.
Well, I think and I think that's a good point, but there's such a small amount right now.
Yeah, right now.
That if, let's say, this didn't happen and this stayed all general commercial, and again, I readily admit there's a lot of ifs, but I think, in my opinion, that's okay. There's still enough open area to have a mixture of office, retail, maybe some other type of use, whatever that is, I don't know, that's a general commercial use, that it could come in and have some diversity of uses, and still be compatible architecturally and still be, granted it's still commercial, but not be so stark of a differing use than what's around here.
I'm inclined to agree with that. I think that the general commercial zoning is intentional, and so I was driving around there. I live not too far from there, and there are lots of houses. It's a beautiful area. It's a beautiful neighborhood, but the whole plan of the neighborhood is kind of to be outside and to be talking to your neighbors. And so, I mean, what would be wrong with some kind of destination place for the community there, potentially? So I just think that it would be interesting to see what could happen there without, and that's what I would like.
So are we coalescing here? Do we want someone ready to make a motion?
I was late. My son was in Scouts.
Sure.
This is my direct backyard.
If your son was in Scouts, you can come up.
Okay. It's his first PAC meeting. So this is just my direct backyard.
So you just state your name and get to the mic. Thanks.
Sorry, I don't know if it's recorded. This is my very first city council, and I'm in my pajamas.
Welcome.
I was watching you guys, and I just was like,
you're on camera too, so.
Okay. So I'm Elizabeth Herman, and this is my backyard. So,
Are you in Hill Farms?
Yes, Hill Farms. So this is, just got a house. Mm-hmm. Yeah, on Havenwood. Yeah. So this is, my direct backyard. And the proposal, all I know is there was a church that was proposed to be, so I know what it is currently, and then we proposed a church. And I'm disappointed that none of my neighbors all through the street that have the same backyard. I'm very disappointed that we're not here and that we didn't show up, but I think it is because they all liked the proposal of the church in the back with maybe some storage units or whatever, and then some residential. It was the proposal of the church that we liked, because then it wasn't, and that's why they're not here, because they figured, they're going to pass it anyway. And that's why I didn't come. So I think if you decide to do what you're talking about, you're going to have a lot of letters, and you're going to have people actually then start showing up. Does that make sense?
It'll actually be the city council's problem at that point.
I don't know how it works.
He's right there.
So you're saying if it's approved or not approved?
If it's not approved, yes, the current proposal. If it's not approved, because we don't want big stuff. We don't want busy stuff. Nothing, and we just feel like the church was the least amount of busyness. Does that make sense? With a little bit of compromise of storage units and stuff away from our backyards, but not directly in our backyards. So.
Right. Do you want to come up to state your name?
We're on Jake's Lane, yeah. And so.
What's your name, ma'am?
I'm sorry?
State your name.
Oh, Holly Peterson, sorry. we're Perry Homes. And I agree with her on a lot of our neighbors didn't come because they were happy with the church being developed there. But the light industrial is where I'm still thrown off, because we do live right in that area, and that horse pasture is our backyard. And so if we do have storage facilities or storage units, whatever you want to call them, that's what I'm going to be looking at every morning when I'm hanging out with my daughter out on our patio. So
Well, okay, let's just go down that road for a second. So let's say this gets rezoned. Now you have the church, you have this piece here, you have this little island of light industrial, and what do we like to do? We like to connect like zones with like zones. So yeah, you may have a horse pasture right here, but maybe these property owners get approached by someone who wants to come in and add some more light industrial, and hey, it makes a lot of sense because it's connected with this light industrial, and boom, you have this swath that's not very usable for general commercial, but it's usable for light industrial, and now you have light industrial. So that's another risk that would happen here.
Yeah, and I think that a lot of our neighbors, I know for sure, are not happy with the light industrial. The general commercial, fine. Office buildings, a doctor's office, insurance office. I mean, anything like that I think would be fine, a shopping center. But turning it into a light industrial and not even guaranteeing a storage unit or something that even looked nice that matches our neighborhood's charming, I think would just be a big mistake. And so, but we love the church, of course, because everybody loves the church. But
not everybody.
But that's just, well, not everybody, but... Yeah, but most of our neighbors do.
I agree.
Except for our direct neighbor. But anyway, so that's kind of our feel on it.
So Holly, were you able to see their proposal for the storage units,
Yes.
the architectural design of it?
Not the architectural design. No, my husband went last night, but I had to stay home with the baby. But he had homework, so I had to. Yeah, see, and I don't think those look good. To me, it just, I don't know. It's just. I just don't like it.
Well, I appreciate your input. We appreciate your input.
Thanks.
Thank you for coming. Okay. You ready for motion? We undecided? Someone want to try? I mean, it sounds like some of us are talking about keeping it general commercial, and maybe there's an option of doing one of the rezones and not the other, recommending one of the rezones and not the others, and certainly we can recommend the whole thing. So.
I can give a shot and we can vote.
Let's do it. Let's make some.
So I make a motion that we deny we recommend denial of a rezone of 3.92 acres of property from GC to R120 and another 1.8 acres of property from GC to LI.
Second.
Aye.
Oh, so no discussion?
Well, do you want to discuss? We've had some.
Yeah, we have discussed.
Oh, okay. Sorry, was my second too early?
No, it's all right. Wait.
Okay,
restate your proposal
again.
Restate it.
Yeah.
So I'm just saying we recommend denial wholesale.
Right.
Yeah,
That's my motion.
On everything. Both.
That's my motion.
I vote is nay, so to speak.
Wait, so you voted aye, then you voted nay,
No,
but
I
are we
voted
discussing?
aye in support of what you just said, that we recommend denial.
But then you said you vote nay.
No.
Yes, I think we're confused.
Okay, so let me just say, I'm saying we recommend that it stay as is. No, we recommend denial of both proposals for rezones.
I voted aye.
Okay.
Which means I'm against
we got it
the
now.
rezone.
Don't talk anymore. We're in. Let the record reflect he's deliberating.
I am deliberating. I'm supportive in part and not so
Do you
supportive.
want to make a what's the word?
Substitute
motion.
Well, I could, but we started voting.
True.
So if we continue on with the voting, I would vote nay.
Aye.
Aye.
Nay.
Aye.
4-2.
The ayes above the
4-2.
noes.
That's good.
Okay, so City Council representative is here. He saw how we struggled through that.
So just for information, we'll get with the developer based on a negative recommendation. They have the choice to go ahead and withdraw and go back and recoup, or they can take it forward to the City Council. This will not go to next week's council meeting. That agenda is going out tomorrow. So it'll be 3 weeks. We'll discuss with them, decide what we need to do. If they choose to just pursue that, then the council will hear your recommendation. and they can make their own choice based on that.
Great. Thank you for that information. Okay. It's been a little while since we've looked at the agenda, but we're now on item number 6. Public hearing and preliminary plat approval for South Angel Street subdivision at approximately 1300 West and Ruche Lane for J.D. Horn. And, Andy, is this your last one?
Yeah, probably.
His last
Forever.
one forever.
We'll see about that.
Well, maybe not forever, but for the foreseeable future. You've done a great job, Andy. We
It'll
appreciate
certainly be the last one tonight.
It's like when like a famous athlete it's their last at bat or something.
Yes.
I know.
We should give him a standing ovation.
Hit a home run, Andy.
Derek Jeter. I think he hit a base hit on his last one. Let's see.
Mr. Horn owns the property here, highlighted in red, down at the very west end of Roche Lane. It's about an acre of property. He also owns much of the property around it. But his immediate plan would be he would like to just split that into 2 parcels. As you can see, 2 half-acre lots. He's currently in the RA zone, which provides for full half acres. These lots meet that requirement. It's on a already improved street with utilities in place, and it provides for additional development of his property in the future. There is a preliminary plat, so public hearing is required, and Mr. Horn is in attendance.
Thank you. It's too bad the other one wasn't the last one, because this one's not quite as controversial. But maybe we can drum something up. Josh? Okay, thank you.
I'm not offended at that.
You shouldn't be. Is there any discussion on this one?
We need to open a public hearing.
Just meets all the
that's right.
requirements.
Sorry. We do have to have a public hearing. So let's open up the public hearing. Is there anyone here to address this item? Once, going twice, 3 times. Okay, we'll close the public hearing. Now, any discussion?
Basically, they're splitting the lot in half, right?
Yes.
Okay.
They did more words than that, but
Yeah.
yes.
Right.
Yeah.
With a measuring tape. Got it.
And it doesn't seem like there's any thing to be
There's,
concerned about.
yeah, it seems pretty straightforward. It still complies and meets with the current zoning.
In fact, didn't we talk about maybe even having these not come to us? I can't remember what we decided.
We did change the ordinance. Staff can now do lot line adjustments, but anytime we create additional lots, then it still comes back to you.
Okay.
So if they would have done this as a single parcel into 1 lot, we could have handled it.
Yeah.
But they're splitting it into 2 lots, that crosses the line.
Okay. So to speak.
You ready for a
Excuse
motion,
me.
Mr. Chair?
I'm ready. Are you
I
ready?
would,
All ready?
Yeah.
I would move that we approve the preliminary plat for South Angel Street subdivision at approximately 1300 West Roche Lane as presented.
Second.
Aye.
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 Okay. Right. Next is amendment of section 173125, telecommunication towers. And let me guess, Lyle, you're going to want to
Ding,
talk
ding,
to us
ding.
about
What
this.
You're becoming the telecommunication expert.
I'd be happy to pass this one back off to the engineer if you'd like to hear from him
We'll
some
just
more.
always leave item 7 to be telecommunications towers.
Well, I'm hoping we can put it to bed, but if you want to continue that tradition, then you've got the prerogative. So, again, we'll allow you to decide how much energy you want to spend on it. I think we're probably at a point, at least I feel pretty comfortable with the ordinance, that it's evolved from some of the previous discussions and feedback that we've had here at the Planning Commission, consideration of our ordinances and how they pertain to cell towers. So of note from our previous discussions, the draft before you and the ordinances have made some particular changes that are worth noting. Go to my report so I don't forget any of them. Foremost is we talked a lot about stealth, and kind of the reason this even came before us as an idea was to allow different types of cell towers, a little bit more creativity from the cell industry, so that we hopefully would get better telecommunication facilities throughout Kaysville rather than what's currently permitted and really the only option. And so previously it just kind of said stealth towers. We showed some examples of what they might be, but the language within the ordinance, as we discussed it, was pretty open to somebody could come in with a cactus, claim it was stealth, and we probably wouldn't have much to say one way or the other with it. So put in some language that specified very different, distinct tower types. I ended up actually taking out roof-mounted and wall-mounted antennas and putting them in their own category with specific criteria, height, square footage, color type requirements. And then I further limited what a stealth tower actually is. So I think it's the third page in on the ordinance. Has a bold stealth tower. It's considered stealth if it is disguised as a tree listed on the Kaysville City tree list, or if it is attached to a pre-existing light pole, utility pole, or similar structure in order to significantly reduce its visual impact. So we showed some water towers or other things, but hopefully that's specific enough. So if it's meets one of those hopefully pretty distinct criteria, then they could qualify for that. It's a shorter tower. 90 feet was the original proposal. It would still be that compared to the 120-foot towers we have now. They wouldn't necessarily have co-location and multiple users on them. Other items that were discussed was how they're approved. So I had put in under the table on the very back of this section of ordinance previously that within the GC and general commercial light industrial zone that stealth type towers could be a permitted use. My thought at the time is maybe that would encourage developers to go after that type of tower rather than going through a conditional use process for the monopole. Based on the feedback, we just listed them all as conditional uses currently under the proposed use table where they would be allowed. So that keeps it in your purview. And then the final thing that was of note is a distance requirement. So we talked about, are we going to start seeing a bunch of cell towers pop up like a tower farm or something all right next to each other? And so one was placed into the ordinance. Always difficult to find the exact right number and what the location, what the appropriate one would be. But under section 6, subparagraph 3, placed a distance requirement of 2,000 feet between towers. Had some rationale behind that, essentially based on where existing towers are located and where I felt some of these park areas we're talking about that they might make sense or up against freeways. It would maintain some of those areas as open. You go much beyond the 2,000 square or linear feet, and you can't even put them there where, at least in my purview, they seem to make some sense potentially. That is specific to the monopole towers only, as written. So if a stealth tower were to be proposed within closer proximity, that could still be feasible. So depending on the amount of discussion you'd like to have, be happy to answer any questions. I feel better that it's at a point where it may be ready for a recommendation, but if the Planning Commission's got some thoughts, concerns, tweaks, again, we can continue to revisit it every other Thursday for the chair's recommendation or pass it along and see what the council does. So well, be happy to take feedback.
If we keep it going, will Andy come back and
help us with it? I'm just curious, where can I see the Kaysville City tree list? I'm just curious.
Well, so we do have it.
Next to the flower list.
We could probably pull it up here. So the city arborist from the Parks Department has put together a list that we utilize with our commercial development that when they pick trees, they're species that actually exist within the area, that are vibrant, that are maintained healthy, and aren't as prone to disease. Okay. So maple tree, I mean, there's probably 100 different species on there, frankly, of different sizes.
But the palm tree, probably not.
I was going to say, yeah, not a palm tree.
But exactly. So you're not going to find things that you don't find in the area because they won't survive here. So it would eliminate a palm tree style or a cactus or some weird foreign vegetation. Most often, development that I've seen, they're deciduous, or coniferous type pine tree disguises. But you may get some more creative maples or something of that nature. Perhaps of note to that, I asked the city arborist if he had to guess how tall is the city's tree canopy on average. You get trees of different sizes, poplars, cottonwoods. Some of them grow quite large. He said, maybe 70, 75 feet is a good tree. Not every tree is that height. So when you're talking a 90-foot tree, it's clearly taller, so it might stand out a little bit, but 15 feet, 20 feet of difference. Hopefully that's masked pretty good, but still gives a provider a little bit of line of sight for their coverage. So for some perspective.
Well, look, this is a lot more detailed than it was before. Like what you've done, even separating out the wall-mounted, roof-mounted, defining stealth. It's quite a bit more detailed. I think that's some of what we were looking for last time. Part of our recommendation was to define it better.
So maybe I didn't read it through carefully, but is the stealth definition limited to trees, or are there other?
Yeah, so it's under section 6. I guess it's about 4 pages in on your packet. 1, 2, 3 pages. There's a bold stealth tower. So I'll just read it again. A stealth tower is considered stealth if it is disguised as a tree listed on the Kaysville City tree list, or is attached to a pre-existing light pole, utility pole, or similar structure. So that with the idea that, and we've had requests.
No, but I'm asking, could they use some other thing like a bell tower or a?
As written, I don't believe so.
Yeah.
So does it make sense to limit it that much? I mean, what if someone could come up with some other?
And that's a great discussion. So at least the impression I got under the last one was you may be limiting some good ideas, but if we're really specific, we also may not be prohibiting or allowing terrible ideas. So we could list a couple other specific items if you think they would be appropriate. Maybe a case where we start seeing that type of request, we amend it. If people are doing something else we can't perceive.
But if they're all conditional uses, couldn't we shoehorn some criticism in by saying one of the foreseeable detrimental impacts of a telecommunications tower is the aesthetics of it, and so that gives us broad discretion to do whatever we want to make it look like?
It doesn't.
It doesn't? Okay. So how so?
And just because you got to be fairly specific. I mean, if you have broad discretion, then the applicant has broad discretion too. And they can probably say, well, I don't like what you're proposing. I like what I'm proposing better. And they probably have a rationale for if it's, reasonable to say, well, yeah, I mean, that would work, but we don't like it. Too bad. They get to do it because we're not specific enough.
So are you saying, Wilf, that if we say stealth, such as disguised as a tree or similar disguise, that we'll lose the ability to say that's not a good enough disguise?
Potentially, yeah.
And I think what you're saying is with conditional uses, the presumption is approval.
Right.
With conditions, and so we kind of have to. We can't come in with a very skeptical eye and the presumption of not approving it, subject to our whims, right?
Right.
We have to presume that it's acceptable with some minor tweaking.
Right.
And what I was saying earlier is wholesale tweaking, which is not acceptable.
Right.
Got it.
Yeah. I mean, we could do that. But by the same token, if the applicant decides to get aggressive about it and say, well, no, I don't like what you're proposing.
Yeah.
Based on your standard, I can do this. And we'd say, well, yeah, but we don't like what you're proposing. And given the case law and now the state code, he wins.
I mean, I guess I have too much faith in language to be able to say something like disguise it such that it is difficult to identify it as a cell tower from distance, something like that,
Lyle, you mentioned we would have the opportunity in the future to amend it if we need to. If people suddenly come up with something brilliant idea to disguise them, and we get a bunch of those that we're turning down, we can always come back and say, okay, we didn't foresee this 3 years ago. Now
and
they've come
then
up with
they'll
something.
refer to this meeting and say you did foresee it. And you did contact. I mean, I'm just saying, let's do it. Let's do it right now if we can. Let's do it correctly now if we can.
But we're also saying we don't foresee what that would be.
Well,
And if we leave it so broad that if some new thought comes up, then we'll consider it. Right now, we're saying we're just going to consider this, and if something does come up, our consideration is we may amend it.
Yeah, I've done some of this. I've had some clients to do this, and they're on the landowner side, and so they've required the cell tower people to come up with some good disguises, and there's a lot of choices that work. And we may be limited here in Kaysville because we don't have the height, the elevations.
Right.
And, you know, the tree question is a good question. If you have a 150-foot tree, that's going to look weird. But I don't know. I guess I have a little more faith in the ability to come up with some language that would work. But that's just me. I mean, I don't
Well, okay, let's see what Will thinks about this. What if this is a legislative decision, right? So we can legislatively vest discretion in the legislative, or in an administrative body, right? So we could write language that's very broad, that is even subjective, that we as an administrative body, is that looking at a conditional use, could then have lots of discretion.
Well, part of it's going to depend on what happens with this case that's in front of the Supreme Court right now with regard to the Cottonwood Mall site redevelopment, because a lot of the very crux of that is what's legislative and what's administrative.
Mm-hmm.
And they in the hearing that they had that was supposed to last a half an hour and went 2 hours, they ask a lot of questions about, well, but by just doing a rezone or by doing a plan and by doing this and that, and the attorneys are as nervous as all get out, because what it sounded like to them, the justices were saying is, hey, a lot of the stuff you're doing is probably in the realm of legislative, even to the point of reviewing and approving site plans and things like that. And they're really nervous what the court's going to come out with. So you may be right now, but that may change when this ruling comes out. So
yeah.
So, Wilf, are you thinking this is too broad or
he likes it the way it is.
I like it
yeah, I like it
okay,
the way
you like
it
it
is.
this way. Okay.
I think
Okay.
we're
You think we're
more
covering
specific
ourselves?
here. Yeah.
Okay.
But my
But
problem
then
with
if
it is
something new
if
comes
a
up-
cell tower, well, it's not new. I mean, there's lots of things
Well,
out
or
there.
new,
You can-
a new.
right, but I mean, if you
arrangement.
go on the internet right now, you could find 10, 20,
That
200 that are not trees.
Yeah.
And some of them are totally lame, and some work really well.
Right.
I've
Some
seen
look
one.
good.
Yeah, I've seen some that looks like it's like an old, like I said, a clock tower and steeple and all this kind of stuff that kind of works.
Mm-hmm.
And some are close, but they don't work. And so it requires some discretion. But
Right.
my hope is we allow for something other than 110-foot trees, but maybe that's good enough.
Fake 110-foot fake trees.
Fake trees.
Which I
Right.
think-
We're talking about
Like, look,
disguises here.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is even the best fake tree does not look real.
Right, right. So I'd say you'd have, I mean, I
So
think
you're
disguise-
getting more options, and which I think is a good thing, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, that's I'm with you. So I don't know if that, yeah, that's my thought.
You could add in the specific examples that you know you like if you wanted to keep it specific.
Well, but the
And
problem is really, it's going to be how they, the execution of it's going to be half of it, 3/4 of it, and their mock-up of it, right? I mean, like that palm tree thing, right? That's just that wouldn't work here. But anyway, drag us through a rabbit hole. We can.
Nor would a water tower, even though they look good. Is there a water tower in all of Utah?
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
there's one.
There's
There's
a couple around, but
one
they're
in
pretty
Kaysville.
rare.
Oh, really?
Probably not in Davis County, though.
Davis County.
Isn't there a water tower up on the?
The
where we
blue
were just
one?
talking about that. East of
Water
89?
tanks.
Water
Tanks.
Towers.
A lot of the
We're talking like the
towers.
water towers like that.
Oh, yeah.
You see,
Yeah.
there's a
Very
couple
Like
of them.
Midwest, like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah, Ogden's
We
got a
have
couple of them.
mountains. We don't need those.
That's what I mean, yeah, right.
Well, that's not the only issue here. Is there other that you want to talk about?
Well, and certainly what would be worth your consideration, and you've had it and perhaps have reviewed it, but is where they're permitted. So again, that table, everything after the table is just saying, let's not list it all over the ordinance. We're just going to list it in this one table. And so if you look at the table, it's telling, okay, here's where we think people could put a wall-mounted facility on or a roof mount. The monopoles are in the same zones where they're currently permitted. The stealth zones are all over, but then the specific notes below it I think are important, where we've added the stealth and roof mount towers. Let's see the asterisks. With the single asterisk, those towers have to be at least 300 feet from the property line of a residential zoning district. And the double asterisks, they're allowed only on properties greater than 10 acres in size, which are also occupied by public or quasi-public use. So again, make sure you're okay with where these might occur. There is general language also that's been added in here. They're not allowed on single-family dwellings, so you couldn't put a roof mount or wall mount antenna on your house. That is stated elsewhere. That was added since our last revision. So
the 300 feet is arbitrary?
Yes.
It seems pretty close.
It's like we talked about, it's not quite a football field, right?
Yeah.
So the question is, do we want to make a recommendation now off of this, or do we want to look at it and come back and vote on it? Are you all familiar enough with these changes that you're ready to recommend it get cemented into the stone tablets of?
I think this is something that you could continually hash and revise, more research, more things, tweaking language, moving this around. I think at some point we just gotta. And I'm kind of like you. I don't know, underneath cell tower. If, you're right. If we put, the number 3, the planning commission can use their discretion, based on what's presented to them. It opens it up. It makes it too wide. But there are, like you said, steeples and water towers, other things like that. But I think we're looking at Kaysville and what's practical in Kaysville. Mm-hmm. What's really going to be practical. This might not work in Salt Lake, but it probably works here.
So is that a vote for voting now?
I feel comfortable with it.
Yeah.
Yeah, me too.
In that we can amend it and, look at it.
I am as well.
The city council is going to go through their own
I don't know, Larry
iteration.
left.
He left.
Well, they have us here, so they kind of presume that we've done
Most
some
of
of
it.
the
We've
homework
done-
for them.
because
But let's do it. If you're ready for a motion, let's do it. I think it's not like we've given this short shrift, right?
Right.
If
seen
I
this
can
before.
find the thing, I'll go ahead and make a motion. This is just a recommendation
Yeah.
Correct.
on this. So I'll make a motion that we recommend the telecommunication tower ordinance revision as presented on October 25th, 2018.
Second.
Is it back to me?
I think it is.
Aye.
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 Okay. Call to the public. Our city council is still here. He's trying to mix it up.
Beverage.
I looked over there and you were gone.
Let the record reflect his absence was not excused.
Did you get a Diet Coke?
Still here.
You didn't pass it around.
Right.
Okay. Any public comments? Okay. Next, we'll move on to reports, calendar, and correspondence.
A couple calendar items, and then if any well wishes have already been started, it would be the other report. But of note, I just sent out an email today, but wanted to remind you that Wasatch Front Regional Council is encouraging us to attend a phasing workshop for their 2050 Wasatch Choices Plan. So they've been working on it for some time. I forget who's been involved at a certain stage, but I think they'll meet on October the 30th. It's from 4 to 6 p.m. at the West Bountiful City Hall.
Are those open to the public?
No. Well, I mean,
They're-
they are, but they're not being advertised to the public.
Yeah, they wouldn't
Because
turn you
that
away
would
with
drive
a
home my
stakeholder.
point earlier, which is even if they were open to the public, there won't be a single citizen show up.
Yeah. These are intended for
Planners.
elected officials,
Yeah.
planners, staff, yeah.
Yep.
There'll be a lot of planning commissioners show up either.
Yeah, probably not.
This is just like the one that was at Fruit.
They did have it
in
at
the
Fruit
basement.
Heights. Yep.
Yeah.
So I think a few attended, and for the public that are listening or turn into this later, I mean, the process itself is very open to the public. They have a website. You can look at maps, give feedback, and give public. So whether you or they are able to attend this meeting or not, please provide input if you have it, wfrc.org. But just watch your calendars for that. Otherwise, our next meeting 2 weeks from today on the 8th of November is all I have. And again, just a farewell and kudos and acknowledgement to our legendary city engineer, Andy Thompson, who's here with us for his last evening as a city employee and moving on to greener pastures. So,
Have you been downloading your institutional knowledge into everyone else's heads?
It's locked away.
It's got a consulting fee of
Yeah.
$350 an hour.
Guys,
Well,
waiting
It's
truth
gonna
be told, he is going to
Contract.
stay involved with in some consultant level,
All right, good.
right?
I was going to say the download would only take 5 minutes.
That's not true.
Not according to Wilf.
No. Hey, can I just, before we leave, can I just say, on the motion on that rezone, I said I agreed in part and didn't agree in part. I agreed with the part about, I think this was meant to be a neighborhood commercial zone. And so from that standpoint, I didn't agree with the rezone to the R120. Even for a church, the rezone to the LI, given what they were going to do, I thought, all right, if we limited just to general commercial uses and the storage units, I'm not a big fan of storage units, but I thought, yeah, okay, that could work. So that part of it, I was okay with them rezoning, but not the residential.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of it either, but I'm looking at, they're already going down the road.
Yeah.
And so to me, it was more like, I thought this was an opportunity to make sure we get what we want. I mean, because quite frankly, I've commented before in this meeting about the dentist office and landing strip lights and out there. It gave us a chance to, like you said, kind of control it, to create a little bit more of our own destiny for that neighborhood out there. And because they're general commercial, they're going to keep going. They're going to put offices in there, and they're going to create whatever they're going to create.
I think they will. I think they're going to keep building offices, but I really wish the city's plan was more specific about putting more neighborhood commercial in areas like that. But the plan's so blue in
Do
general.
we even have a commercial zone that's restrictive in that sense?
We tried to do that once in the past, create a neighborhood
Retail,
commercial
or
zone,
commercial,
and it just didn't work well in Kaysville. There's not enough areas that it can go to. At the time, there probably wasn't enough population to support it. I understand exactly what you're saying, Wilf, and it's probably worth another look at now that we're a little bit older and a little bit fatter.
Yeah, but it's almost too late.
Well, but I mean, here's the thing. Like, and this was one of the.
It's a difficult one.
This is one of the reasons why I think we keep it as is because two things. Well, one of them's coming up for sure. The other one could come up at any time, probably after the first thing, which is the general plan's going to get amended. And at that point, maybe we can could recommend a zone just for that square.
Absolutely. That's what we should do.
And then a general plan, and then you craft an actual zone based on what's recommended in the general plan, and now you have a zone that does address what you want there.
That can be our inland port zone.
Our
right.
inland port. But are we too far
inland Portland
down the road? I mean, that's something that would have to happen soon. They've got sold one property.
Oh, I know.
The other two, they're moving. This may change their plans, but I think now they're going to open up and just do whatever that general commercial zone allows in there, and we're not going to have a say over it.
Other side of that is Kaysville City. I won't say they never have, but they typically do not initiate rezones from the city.
Yeah.
I think
No, but we should.
I mean,
Especially after redoing the plan, just
Yeah,
like you say.
exactly.
Redo the plan, and then we should zone it
That-
with
I
what
mean,
we want.
and- and-
in
Because
what
that-
the plan says.
That's
Yeah, I
what
agree.
planning is.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
Which hasn't,
Yep.
Well, I agree with all that. I think
I
we're
agree.
a little bit late to the dance. So.
Yeah, I agree. I think the barn doors
And-
kind of closed on this one.
Yeah. So I think we, hopefully, I mean, they're a very reputable, good company. They're not going to do anything
Right.
there that
No, I
blights
agree.
their name at all. They're going to do quality.
No, I think if they-
But
if they
I
do
think
like-
to me, I think we lost an opportunity to help create it with setting a development agreement and giving direction on, kind of what we could have done there. That was my whole thing with it is because like I said, I was adamantly opposed and kind of what some of the charge to oppose it last time. I was dead set against it, but I think that the way they kind of packaged it together, it softened it a lot.
Yeah.
So,
But the Stake Center too is a big chunk of
yeah.
commercial that was
4 acres of it.
leaving.
And I guess they always could come back just on that portion, though, couldn't they? Even though this was designed or rejected, package, they still could come back just on that portion, couldn't they, for rezone?
Well, they still have to go to the council. And
Yeah.
who knows what the council
Well, if
will
they
do.
choose,
Or
yeah,
they've
if
got
they
a lot of
choose to.
choices.
They can pull it and amend it.
Yeah.
I mean,
They
we
can't
just
come back.
recommended. The council may do whatever with it.
right,
Yeah,
they could
but that's up
approve
to
it.
them to go to the council.
Right.
Yeah.
At this point.
Yeah.
Or they could come back just for the, which I don't know, the land there, it is expensive, and opportunities to have a buyer's kind of far and few between over there, I think.
Well, under
But
the
if we-
current zoning.
Yeah.
It's-
under the
it's-
current
Say
zoning.
this into the mic, but the irony of this will be that we recommended to rezone that Boondocks property, and they said they wouldn't because they needed the commercial, and now we're recommending not to rezone the commercial.
Well, see, and I,
Would council rezone it?
See what they
and
did.
I wasn't here for that, but that was the one that I was actually,
Well,
actually
see, and that's-
opposed to that one.
But
That's
think
why I
that-
think this one's distinguishable. That one, in my opinion, warranted a rezone.
I think
This one
implications
does
are
not as
different.
much.
This is going to be a major hub, where that other place is always going to be difficult to get commercial to. Yeah.
See, like
See, and all
this
the more
one.
reason, a major hub, I think, all the more reason we need to have some control over it.
But
Well, this one-
But we didn't have that in front of us. I mean, I like what you're saying, but we need to have the city do something or somebody come to us and say, let's rezone this. But I mean, the only choice we had was to make this not commercial.
Well, and Josh's point, when we rezone this, we landlock that other portion, and we basically
Yeah.
lose
I
that as
agreed
well.
with that.
Well, or same, and I like the idea of I thought the storage was a decent use of that center
I
piece.
agree.
But once you put that there, then it basically makes, your grand commercial plan out the window.
Here's where I think this parcel as it sits today is where the America First parcel was 10 or 15 years ago. If this in 10 or 15 years still sits here and is not being used like we had envisioned it, then I could understand the rationale for wanting to change. But which is why I felt like a rezone was okay on the America First parcel, because it had sat there and there was nothing going to change in the vicinity that was going to change what had been there for 10 years. In 10 years, there's going to be a lot of more change out here. And at that point, in my opinion, it will be even more strongly
Well, in 10 years,
GC.
it's going to be developed out, most likely.
Right, which means
Yeah.
a better likelihood for general commercial.
It means a better likelihood for more offices, and I don't know. Me personally, I think we kind of missed I understand what you're saying with we've landlocked it, but those are, and planning is a bunch of ifs. When you plan, it's ifs. That's what you plan for, but the likelihood of all three of those landowners selling, what's going to have to happen is they're going to have to pass away. Then their kids are going to decide, hey, we want to get rid of the land. Let's take the highest bidder.
But I'm confused
Or-
because you keep on saying that, and it seems like to me, if we want to make this more commercial, then we did the right thing tonight. And if we approved it, It wasn't going to get commercial.
It was, well, me
'Cause we
personally,
have a
I
stake
like the idea of the stake center. I think it often buffers it. And I
Buffers
like
what?
Just the impact to the
the
community.
impact to the communities. And I think that well, it's a moot point because we're past it, but I think that they're gonna now do whatever general commercial use is in there, and we're not gonna have any say over it.
But the buffer talk is about protecting the residential feel, and that's not, buffer is not pro-commercial, that's pro-residential.
Yeah, that's pro-residential, yeah.
And I thought we were talking that we wanted to make this as commercial as possible.
No, I think we had a balance, we had a mix. That's, see, the Boondocks piece, well, right next to it, I'm the opposite with that one. I was gone that night. I had work that night, but that one I was actually opposed to. That one I didn't like the mix. I didn't like the proposal that I'd seen so far. I thought that one we needed more commercial or better quality commercial. Where this one, I think, because of the surrounding neighborhood, kind of where it's at, where that road, it is going to become a major corridor going through there. I think it just gave us an opportunity to kind of control it a little bit more. But
How?
long
By making it
term, it's
state
going to become. It'll never become a neighborhood center, I don't think.
Suggest maybe you adjourn the meeting.
Yeah.
And then if you would wish to continue on, then
That's a good point.
Yeah.
Well, these are advisory notes for the city council.
Emily quit taking minutes, Emily.
Yeah. Well, Thad, I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Okay, well, if that's the case, we're done, yeah.
All right. Somebody move, we adjourn?
I move
Good
that we
discussion,
adjourn.
but it might be better off.
They have these colors. You're going to Liz, aren't you?